My name is Pedro Sousa. Hi everyone, welcome. We're talking about workforce development. Yes, that's why we're all here. But before we even get started, we need to understand, why am I here? Why am I standing in front of you? What gives me the right to even talk about this subject, right? And part of that goes back to 2014 and my work and why I became very passionate about workforce development. And it actually started when I was a preschool teacher for a Title V program, and it had me evaluate quality within California. My background is in life science. It's not in early childhood education. I don't want to say I fell into this, but I became very passionate about it when I worked in after-school programs, getting my BA degree. From there, I saw inequity within our workforce and how our teachers are prepared, and within our matrix system, and how me, in getting my life science degree, I was able to be a site director really early on with very little content or knowledge about ECE. This is the reality, right? But we need people. And then from there, that started my journey, which got me here to the county office after pursuing some projects and different work experiences.
Hi, I'm Kimmy Nguyen, and I'm with the Wested E3 Institute. I've actually have I want to say similar story where you kind of just take a job out of college, and then I kind of fell into this. Oh, yeah, that's right. So I work primarily with the stipend program, and it's been going on for about over 10 years. It started off as CARES Plus, and now we have a Quality Matters stipend program. So the kind of work that I do is I work directly with our early educators. So it's from the assistant teacher to the site supervisor. They've been in this incentive program. I can count like a handful that's been in it since the beginning, and I'd watched them grow into, they started off as assistant teachers, and now I've seen some of them in leadership roles. So it's really powerful, and I think I bring that perspective to this presentation today.
Thank you.
Oh, you have your own.
I do. We're learning. This is the technical side that we don't get to explore. Okay, so introductions. We're still waiting for our PowerPoint to be on the projection. We're working on that. But what we're going to do, we're doing something a little bit different. We want you to get off your feet. So if you're joining us in the virtual world, write down some of these questions so you could be aware of some of the conversation you should be having at your site. And we're going to reflect back on some of these questions. So what I'm going to have you do for the next 20 minutes is you're going to stand up. You're going to mingle. You're going to look at some of these questions, which are questions that you've already identified within your workforce, and so that I can get a feedback of where we're at in this room. And it will lead our conversation as we progress through this workshop. So these questions look like, what is the future of ECE teacher preparation in California? Do any changes need to occur to our ECE matrix? Where do you find training to enhance your professional development goals? Do you feel that your educational training prepared you for being a teacher? And explain. Do you have any fears or concerns about workforce development and the future of ECE in California? And what is the biggest issue facing ECE professionals in California? You might not have enough time to address all of these questions. You might want to spend a lot of your time at just one, but that's what this is all about. We're trying to digest and understand what we know about this content, and then we're going to explore what is the state doing, and they're doing amazing work. Okay, so 20 minutes, we're going to come back at 11:10, and we're going to reflect out, and then we're going to dive into what's happening at the state level.
And then for the virtual room, I will help monitor that process.
I'm going to turn off my mic for the 20 minutes. Kimmy's going to help the virtual room digest some of these questions, and I'm going to walk around to the individual questions posted and reflect with the individual groups. Okay, so we're going to start that right now. in about 5 minutes, I'm going to start collecting these bulletin boards, bringing them to the front, and then from there, I'm going to read out some of your responses. I'm not going to be able to go through every single one because we're only here for an hour and 30 minutes. But from there, we can get a sense of what the group is telling us and what the need looks like. And then we're going to connect it to what's happening at the state level. Back, mic check. We're coming back in. I'm going to make it 2 more minutes. I'm collecting this documentation, bringing it to the front, and we're going to not necessarily go through it line by line, but go digest some of these individual pieces. And then Kimmy, can you hear me? Yeah, so once we get to a point, I'll have Kimmy come back out with us, and she's going to help us with the reflection piece after we hear a lot of content that's happening at the state level. I was hearing a lot of great conversations around aligning, right? Rather than having all of these individual specifications, we're looking at streamlining things and giving people an opportunity. I think did my mic turn off? No, it went down. Giving people an opportunity to explore content within different courses that they're taking, whether they are getting their special ed credential or maybe looking at their permit, exploring content within all these different areas. Okay, so is it working? Nice. Okay. So real quick, I'm just gonna I might read through some of these and I might ask for clarification, and that's where you're gonna raise your hand. I'll give you the mic, and you're gonna give me some of that feedback. Okay. So when I come to over here, we talk about what is the biggest issue facing ECE professionals, and I loved how someone said these increased expectations without compensation, right? We know that's an issue, and we're hoping that through the Lattice and through the workforce development that we can address some of these issues. Someone said too low pay, right? More professional development, and we're going to talk about that, what's happening within your counties and in Santa Clara County that maybe can influence and change what's happening at your districts. And more inclusion PD. Amen to that, right? We need to have more opportunities to be resourceful, pull from our community, and then come together as a group and share our thoughts and ideas. That's what's very valuable about this space. Any comments about these issues that we're facing? Okay. And then let me look at what's the future. I want to understand where you guys think the future is of ECE. And someone brought up a universal preschool concept. And I would love the group to comment on that, because right now we are, I don't want to say we're divided, there's a spectrum of ideas, and pertaining to this group, what does that idea look like when it comes to universal preschool? And pertaining on specifically workforce. Okay, we know universal preschool is accessibility, but how will that look pertaining to workforce? Okay, we're going to talk about that. Student enrollment. Can someone chime in what they meant by student enrollment? I know it wasn't me who wrote it down.
I think it was just thinking about how to get more students enrolled, to figure out how to promote kind of that parent education part of how important preschool programs are, and looking for that more student enrollment to kind of give the access to all.
Okay, so give access to all, trying to make more slots for more children, bring them into our programs. What's something that we're facing in addition to workforce preparation? We did a big implementation plan, and we've been talking about it here in Santa Clara County, and I'm sure other counties are facing it. What do you think in regards to enrollment?
Facilities.
Oh, you best believe we're talking about facilities. Okay, so we have a need for enrollment, but we don't have the space to accommodate kids. That's a big problem. And in Santa Clara County, it's really expensive to run and operate a child care facility, especially if you're running out of a school district or a county office, just because of different requirements and different standards. Okay, so we're going to come back to this. Kimmy, did you want to add anything before we move on?
So I'm going to share some items that were shared in the virtual group. Very much matches what's been going on here in person. But let's see. So let's start off with what is the biggest issue facing ECE professionals? And one person in particular said, have we heard conversations about increasing wages? And just as of a show of hands, in the past 3 months, how many of you have heard of those, of those talks, whether if it's at a legislative forum or just in regular meetings with your staff, right? Okay, well, not that many, but from the meetings I've attended, it's at the top of everyone's list. We know that we need to do better, and try to increase those wages because that's how we're going to retain this field. So that was a big one. And then, do you feel that your educational training prepared you for being a teacher? One person in particular said, not in the classroom. It was through networking, getting out there, going into, being in, networking with people, going to trainings, that really got that person the experience they need to work with in this field versus just the degree. And lastly, the professional development piece. I followed up with whether online, if people in the county or in the state were using online trainings, and one person from Solano, and I forget where the other person's from, but online trainings have been effective as well. So
Nice.
yeah.
Thank you so much, virtual audience, for sharing that feedback with us. And we're hoping that we're going to provide opportunities for pause, so you'll have that chance to ask those questions. This is your public disclaimer. You're reaching the very dense piece of our presentation, and you're going to be asked to absorb a lot within the next 30 minutes. So I hope you're ready for this. Pedro, what are you doing to me? You're asking me to absorb this content? I know. But let's start from the beginning, or at least from when I got involved within this process. And Senate Bill 858 passed within California, which started this discussion about revamping the ECE matrix. I know a lot of us are coming in with our special ed background. We're going to focus on this content first before we explore the workforce. And what this said, it wanted to review and update, if appropriate, to see if we need to make changes to what's happening right now in that to that piece of paper that you have in front of you. Okay? And the big term, the next piece to this was the state developed a child development permit advisory panel, and I was one of those participants, right? I stepped up and I said, I want to be a part of this group because based on my story, I was not prepared for what was in store for me. As a director, a very young director, 24 units or 12 units for me was not enough for me to say, hey, I'm well-rounded in all of these areas, and I can lead a group of 12 individuals to be successful. And that's where I came in. I had to really be honest with myself, and I had to be honest with the workforce to really understand how we can support teachers. I'm in a different place right now, and as I continue to follow this work, I understand how my story and other people's stories really aligned and really wanted to change this permit system. So the work began in spring 2014 in Oakland at West Ed, and it was really great, an opportunity that we all met and we all had shared ideas. So this is our current matrix system. We're all aware of it. Many of us are married to it because our careers are aligned to it. You need it if you work in a Title V program. I want to make that really clear. These standards are not set for everyone. That's a really big misunderstanding. So when we were advocating at the state level to increase certain standards, people were like, whoa, Pedro, you're moving way too fast. I don't understand why you're asking for BA level at some of these levels. And we had to keep reminding our audience, hey, this is not going directly to these private operated programs. We're looking at federally funded, state-funded programs that are receiving this public money to increase these standards. And that was sort of our drive for the workforce at that time, right? 30 stakeholders within the state of California saying, hey, this is what we need to be. I did not provide you in this presentation with those ideas. Do you know why? Because they're not going to be made available, and I'm going to tell you why as we move forward in this presentation. During that work in 2014, this amazing piece of documentation came out, which really challenged how we were shaping the permit system, transforming the workforce from California birth through age 8 and unifying foundations. So what this basically said, it gave us an implementation plan, an idea of how we should be shaping our workforce within ECE. Pedro, what happened after that? Oh my gosh, I'm so happy you asked. California was 1 in 5 states that basically said, hey, let's try and make this happen. And we did that by developing a task force, which we're going to explore what that criteria is later on in this very dense piece in our presentation. So understanding the research, First Five California Department of Education brought together stakeholders and created a plan, which we're going to review with you today. They called it the California Transforming the Workforce for Children Birth through 8 Implementation Plan. And if you're in the virtual world and later on after this presentation, you can review this really healthy document after today, and it will break down the timeline of when we're going to see this happen within our state legislation or within the task force that they've assigned to the individuals. Has anyone read or looked at this piece yet? Oh, great, you have a weekend read. Oh, and it's attached on here, so I'm looking forward to emails later on after today. Okay, now we're 1 year later, February 2017. What happened? So staff presented their final recommendations to the CTC or CDC, and what they said is, we're not going to do anything. Staff recommended that the commission not adapt structural changes to the permit. Let me tell you what was happening. Some of our recommendations might have hurt our community to a point where it would immobilize us and even disable us. And those recommendations, one of them was, and the biggest fear is, eliminating the teacher on record as the AT. So right now, the AT can be the teacher on record within a Title V program. That's 12 units. And a constant discussion that we were having at the state level was 12 units is not enough to bring that level of quality or not enough content for you to absorb to even make you a qualified teacher. So that was one recommendation. Another recommendation was looking at the site director and wanting that site director to have teacher experience. Hey, I was a young site director, fresh out of college with 12 units, and I became a site director. Was I prepared for that? Not really. And that was the honest conversation that we had at the state level, and valuing how in the credentialing world, how you have to have that classroom experience before you can become an administrator. So those conversations kept happening. We would go back and forth. We would leave really upset sometimes. That's honest. When we become passionate, we're emotionally driven creatures. That's just how we work. So after it was denied, and I put why it wasn't adapted. We also talked about cost. We talked about infrastructure and how our field cannot support these changes, and the supply and demand, right? If a lot of this content or a lot of our students are coming from community colleges, are we giving them enough time to get to those new qualifications? And it wasn't enough time. Okay. Oh, but before we move on, the CTC staff said we're going to put together a technical advisory work group, and we're going to explore and review competencies within the teacher level of the permit. What does that mean? What is the standard, or what do teachers need to know in order to be deemed ready for the workforce? Off the top of your head, as a teacher, as an educator, can you share out what are some things that you might have needed or wanted or knew prior to entering your teacher role? I know it's a very broad question.
Classroom management skills.
Oh, yeah. Oh, classroom management skills was shared out by the audience. So, yeah, we're not really ready when we learn about all these theories. Sometimes we need more of that practice.
Interactions with the parents or guardians.
Yeah, interactions with parents and guardians is another one. How can we prepare for those hard conversations that you have to have about maybe needing to sit down and really explore development and where their child falls within the DRDP?
And as the teacher, learning to be able to guide the assistants as well.
Right.
That's a huge piece.
So learning to be able to guide the assistants, being a leader within your classroom and provide that co-coaching, co-teaching model to support all individuals in your classroom. We're asked a lot. This expectation is really high for teachers, and as a workforce, we don't know if we're trained or we've received the education to get to that point of competency. Okay, we're now in October. It's fall. I love fall. So the workforce presented a plan. So the CTC staff reviewed significant feedback from higher education, representing other ECE stakeholders, and provided a draft of the master teacher and teacher level of the permit. And I didn't provide that draft. It was another dense document that I will make sure that I add to this presentation later on that you can review this weekend. And it talked about these 6 standards. And they basically, what they did is they looked at the current competencies, they looked at coursework that was being taught, and where the coursework fell within the different layers of the permit. And what they were finding is at the JC level, that coursework that students were receiving, there isn't enough content to put in all those coursework, right? It looked like we had to have a baccalaureate degree or a BA degree to sort of fulfill all these requirements that we're asking. We're asking them to be mindful or even at master supporting students' learning. We're asking for maintaining effective environments in students' learning and understanding organizing subject matter. That's a lot to take in within a 2-year degree. And that's what this advisory panel started discussing and reviewing and assessing how our workforce was going to be enhanced if we can't fulfill that at a 2-year college level. So during this meeting, recommendations from the permit, so there were recommendations that came from that advisory committee, also followed some of the permit guidelines. And one of the recommendations was looking at each individual level and what those competencies look like for future workforce training, right? So what is, for an associate teacher, is 12 units enough? And we stopped actually looking at units at that point, and we started looking at the K through 12 model and how we were looking at competencies, right? Because that's how our professional development organizations work, or at least credentialing specifically, is that they look at content rather than getting permits or certificates based on units, right? How are you mastering that competency? The goal is also of this group is completing a draft set for the program guidelines for prepares for early care and education workforce, and we wanted to get additional feedback regarding the teacher recommendations and master teacher recommendations from stakeholders. And a final draft version of this plan will be presented later on as the work continues to progress. Okay? Any questions before I move on to the next section of this presentation? Okay, I know it's a lot. So another amazing thing that we constantly talk about in ECE is our individual silos, right? So we're here today mingling with a lot of different people from different organizations. We have people from different districts. We have county offices. And California said, hey, we have to find ways to align these different ideas and these different programs so we know what's happening. So what they did is, and the links are attached for you to review in the virtual world and also after this presentation, we looked at an ECE collaborative map. And we basically looked at for-profit, nonprofit agencies and individual areas of focus that those agencies worked on, and we saw how they mingled together. And this was important for us to review at the state level because we wanted to see how different agencies help our workforce. Okay, so you're going to get to review that at the end of today. When you click on these individual points or when you zoom in, you get a scope of work that's happening within that area. Right? So if you click on healthcare, it gives you a description and it defines what that looks like. And when you click on those different gray points, it tells you what those nonprofits or for-profit agencies do specifically to affect ECE workforce or funding. ECE organization maps, the technical work group committee use this as well in understanding if we were to make these changes, where can staff acquire resources? And of course, we have areas that are here today and areas within California that are highly populated and areas that have a smaller population. So how can we get those resources accessible to everyone? Okay, we're reaching the end. So we're going to go back to 2016 when the implementation plan came out to the public, an idea of what we're going to do. I'm going to be talking about one of these in greater detail. And there was 3 components to this implementation plan and how they were going to present it to the public and what we need to do to make our workforce better. Part of it was in regards to permitting and credentialing, professional pathways, and higher education and ongoing professional learning. A lot of information on this slide, but basically the consensus of the work group and the content that was provided to the work group, it was decided that they wanted to adapt standards for development and certification of early care and education professionals and to find essential knowledge and skills are articulate and the improvement, California Multiple Subject Teaching Credential and the California Quality Rating Improvement System. So they want to look at these different standards to improve the quality of our credentialing programs, right? And they want us to be mindful of all of this content underneath. So being mindful of research-based practices, be responsive to different age groups, birth through 8, and looking at that within the content and standards. Develop and implement a robust, responsive statewide system. So when we dive deeper into this implementation plan, they talk about an ECE credential, right? Which one school within our state has, and I believe it's within Fresno, and if I'm incorrect, I apologize. But it's basically, they looked at competencies, they looked at standards, and they created a credential within the K through 12 world that focuses on ECE development. So I'm going to have Kimmy step in here and talk about professional pathways. She has content that's going to highlight sort of what the state has implemented or is trying to do at this point.
So on this slide, the professional pathways, they broke it down to 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. So as you can see with the first one, it's basically to develop the career lattice. 2 is to identify the opportunities and support for that. And then 3 talks about adopting and supporting the ECE workforce registry. Just a show of hands, how many of you guys have heard about the career lattice or the term career lattice? Just a couple of 3 people? Okay, I'm just gonna call out on you. When did you first hear about the career lattice? So recently? Yeah, how about you? Yeah, a couple of the answers so far in person has just been recently. I will have to tell you, I've heard about the career lattice for about 9 years now, since 2010 actually. It was like the first time my colleague said something about career lattice. And I was much younger then, so it's like, career lattice, what's that? And so to see us come like this far is pretty incredible. And as we all know, it's a journey, as Pedro has taken us through with the permit. And then also, the ECE work registry, same thing. It was I've been hearing it for about 10 years. I do have like some news later on in the presentation about how we've really gotten on board of having people enroll, and there's sort of like this paragraph of like promote education and training and further your professional development, but I work at the ground level, so I tell them, think of it as an online resume, so that when you move from organizations and you move to different counties in California, your information is stored and you don't have to go in that box file in your car to look for that one transcript so that you can get credit for QRS or to show that you can work for a certain organization. So that's how I tell people, and that's when it clicks to them. I just tell them, it's like an online resume, and it's stored for you. So now that it's been verified in the registry, you don't have to dig up your materials again from wherever you're storing it. And we all know space is limited here in California. Okay, so what I wanted to do now is just go to showing you what just got adopted. So this is the, oops, oh yeah, how do we, oh, I did something. So in just recently this summer, in June of 2018, the group voted, and so the documents have been approved. And you can see it online now. So virtual room, you can go online right now. If you put in CDE, Career Lattice, you will see the documents. Okay, so you'll see the documents, and there's this, there's a guide to how to read the documents, and there might be some revisions, but for the most part, it is the draft, and it's been, okay, so you guys can't see it here, but I think the virtual room can see it. But I wanted to say, one of the key things that I've heard about the Career Lattice that people have asked is, what's the difference between the Career Lattice and the Permit Matrix, right? So the Permit Matrix, if we all remember, it was established so that there was like required certification for teachers in state-funded programs. And so the Career Lattice expands on it so that it can include and recognize entry level and advanced levels of education. And so it includes a wider range of career opportunities. So it doesn't replace the matrix, but it is a framework that the early learning field, from training organizations to colleges, that can use to help people identify what they need to do to get to their career goals. And I wanted to show you one example, but we're having a hard time getting something on here. And I apologize for messing up the PowerPoint. Okay, so I guess. Oh, perfect. So, but then you have to, oh, okay. So this is the guide. So this is the guide. And you can get this right on the website. And then I'm going to pull up the actual grid, because I think it'd be neat. Here it is. Ah, okay, perfect. I'm not a PC user. Let's try this again. Can you go to that one, the grid? Oh, there it is. And then scroll. Yeah, scroll up. Yeah, there we go. So as you can see, there's 10 levels in this career lattice. And so once again, I had mentioned that it expanded on the entry level. So you'll see that includes like level 1 and 2. And I think, if we think about it, this is where it is. So the permit matrix starts right here at 4. And so they included 3 levels before that, so that the entry level people can come in and have like a guide to see what they can do to continue their professional development. And then I'm gonna scroll down. And as you can see, what they did here with the Career Lattice is they tried to match it very much closely to the permit matrix, right there. And then, in addition, you have the associate's degree, the bachelor's degree. And the interesting thing about this is, does anyone have, oh, Pedro, you're a good example. The BA in life science, correct? So according to the Career Lattice, he could actually enter into this field at like a level 8, but as you can see, if it's just his life science, let's pretend he didn't have his 20 like ECE units. You can go from the early learning caregiver teacher, the early learning administrator, the early learning specialist. They all need some subset of like ECE background. But he can actually enter at 8D, which is the support. So it's staff people at some of these agencies. And they've done that intentionally so that the person who enters this field can get an idea of their career goals and what they need to do to achieve it. So if a person's goal is to work at a R&R and they're in life science, they would know that there's not this huge need for them to take ECE courses. They can still get jobs, but at the same time, if they had a goal to become a school psychologist, they would have that guide to know that, oh, I'm gonna need those courses. So that was intentional. And then we have the master's degree and then the doctorate. So it's actually a really clean document, and so if you learn how to sort of read it, very much like the permit matrix, and then the guide that goes along with it would help. So we can make sure that we include this link, but other than that, you can type in CDE Career Lattice. Okay, perfect. And then the next couple of ones. Okay. There we go.
Okay. That's me.
Yep.
Okay, so the final part of the recommendations from the implementation plan, once again, went under 3 different components. And it's basically looking at accreditation schools and looking at stakeholders and their, their part in workforce preparation. And in order for us to have a greater impact on our workforce, we have to look at the courses that are being offered and those student learning outcomes. And right now, that's where we're headed. We're looking at preparation courses because once we get those people who are coming from our college level, from colleges, they've already had their content. And if we're wanting our workforce to be well-versed and understand what that content looks like, we have to meet them in the beginning. We can't just expect them to have this, these high expectations and be well-rounded if we're not preparing them. And I think that's what the implementation plan really highlights, is how we're preparing our workforce and not so much how are we going to get them once we get them after college. Okay, so I want to revisit some of the ideas and questions that we talked about in the beginning of this presentation. So knowing what we know about workforce development and where our state is headed, where do you see our future? Kimmy's going to go back and connect with a virtual audience and see if your answers have changed. So maybe let's revisit to what was stated here. And when I think about what's on this list, I see years sometimes attached to it. Is it a 5-year plan? Is it a 10-year plan? Is it a 50-year plan? In education, we might be looking at a 50-year plan. So right now, when I look at this list, I look at I see universal preschool, but maybe what we're seeing in our workforce is getting ready to revamp our accredited programs and getting them ready for the workforce. Okay? What's the next question? So how can we prepare for these changes? I work for the county office. You work for school districts. You work for nonprofits. What's going to happen now? I hope no one says, oh, well, you know, I'll take whatever comes to me. My biggest joy about being a preschool teacher is I've learned the skill of waiting and time. So, in knowing that, I can wait for a long time. I should have told you we were being tested on this. Last night I went to class. I also teach at San Jose City, and I threw candy. I was like, yes, thank you for participating. I left it at home. No, I'm sorry. I have the implementation plan. Okay, so how can we prepare for these changes? It's all about partnerships, right? So when we look at JCs, how can we as a county office, how can we partner with JCs once they start revamping their coursework to bring in that coursework and content and educating the workforce that's already here? Right, that's one idea. What are some others? I wonder if Kimmy, I think Kimmy's coming out here right now. Did they share anything in the virtual world?
Yeah, so I think, hold on. I think this question is, so there was a follow-up question to your presentation.
Great.
Would a ECE credential change our teachers from classified employee to credentialed employee in school districts?
Well, the question is, in most of the school districts I've worked in, the ECE teachers with their permits are actually certificated teachers.
So not necessarily. So our permit system does not align with the credentialing system. And that's the conversation that's happening at the state level. And when I say doesn't align, like for me, having my BA degree and having my permit does not mean I'm a credentialed teacher and I cannot teach in a K through 12 world, right?
Agreed, but at least I know in both Glendale Unified and Pasadena Unified, they fall under the like the union for the credentialed teachers.
Right.
And that area.
So
it's not like the same credential as a multiple subject credential is for an elementary teacher, but because they have the permit.
are those teachers, let's say they're the teacher on record, let's say they're in a transitional kindergarten classroom.
No, these are teachers that are in the state preschool.
State preschool. So is that, can you read that question again? Is that asking, I'm understanding that question differently.
Would a ECE credential change our teachers from classified employee to credentialed employee in school districts?
So I believe currently, you're right in the sense that at school districts they are credentialed or they're under that bracket, right? But when we understand credentialing and when we understand how that falls within the school districts, those ECE teachers cannot move to teach other grades, like, right, the credentialing teachers. So if we have an ECE credential, that will allow that flexibility and move around within the early learning years, birth through 8.
The reason I'm bringing it up is because it gets very sticky when you're working in school districts.
Yeah, it does.
And we were talking about this a little bit before, because some of us come in with early childhood special education credentials or backgrounds and trainings, and then are
Oh, I need to give you the mic. Can you give the mic?
So there are some of us who come in with early childhood early childhood special education type credentials. We are actually credentialed special
Yes.
education teachers with full credentials, oftentimes with a multiple
Yes.
subject credential in addition. And in an inclusion setting might be partnered with a teacher who has a permit, which is also issued through the Commission
Yes,
for Teacher Credentialing.
right.
And oftentimes, it's tricky because you don't want to say, well, they are a permit teacher. I am a credentialed teacher, because in the district, they're seen as still having a credential because of their permit. So it becomes this really interesting ballgame. There may be separate parts of the union contract for those teachers. They may have a different pay scale than the credentialed.
Yeah.
So we have to start looking at our terminology too, because it becomes a source of
So this was happening at the state
contention
level.
at the school levels as
Yeah.
the district levels.
When we looked at this terminology, credentialing versus permitted, a lot of the discussion happened on how can we, I don't want to use the word respect, but how can we show the importance, right? And when we're looking at Title V programs and those qualifications, the minimum qualifications, we weren't seeing that compared to our K through 12 teachers, that preparedness versus the teachers in the permitted role, right? Because not every teacher we're going to come across within that role, ECE professional, has that bachelor's degree, right? They might have a variety of different backgrounds. So at the state level, they do want to explore a credential. And maybe that's not they're not using those words exactly, but they're using words like exploring competencies and exploring courses, which is diving deeper. And when we look at the broad scope, how is that going to affect the workforce? Well, it's putting another system in place like a credential. And that's not necessarily the state saying that, that's just me making an educated prediction on what the workforce might turn into in the next 15 to 20 years. Yes?
So my question, or actually, I know that only some districts do that. Not all the districts have them as certificated. I know some that have them as classified.
Right.
And I feel I'm a certificated preschool teacher, and
Yep.
I'm pursuing my career as well. And I feel that the reason why some districts do that is because they want to give teachers opportunities to get the same benefits as a real teacher or a credential teacher, like you guys said, would do it. I have a special education teacher that's in my class and who doesn't have any background in ECE, so she's helping me and I'm helping her. That's why when he asked about like what should we change in the future for ECE, it would be to combine those courses of special education and ECE so the ECE teachers can go in the field and actually know about special education, you know, and I just throw you in the classroom and be like, you're going to do inclusion, and, you know. So for me to get my ECE, it was actually, it's not just how it was before where you get 6 units and no. I had to go through a lot of courses. Yeah. I have a life, you know, as well. I have 2 children that I had to leave aside to be able to do that. I had a student teach before I even went in the field. So I was, you know, prepared, but like any other teacher, you learn as you're in the field.
Right.
So I feel that's why a lot of districts take in consideration to getting those teachers as certificated. I know it's not as credentialed because I'm going through that path now, and I know it's really, really, really hard to become a credentialed teacher. That's what I feel that the districts are doing, and I have heard some other districts are like, nope, you're classified. So it just depends on the district and the opportunities they want to give to the teachers.
Right. So we're going to get into this next piece later in the presentation, but another piece that I want you to think about is how can you make your voice be heard? And we're going to talk about that because we have these stories and we have these ideas and that enrich our community, and we need to let policymakers as well as these committee members hear these voices in these stories. And I might advocate certain groups within your county for you to reach out to start having your voice be heard. Especially in this political climate, we know how powerful voices can be, and the state realized in 2014 we're very loud, right? And thank goodness a lot of us come from classrooms and we model using our words and expressive language because we were very expressive at that time frame and even before that. So Kimmy is going to be coming in here. She's going to be talking about what's happening at our county level. Okay, and this might be different than what's happening at your level, and if it's something that's not happening, we can hopefully work with you to make this happen because we're talking about sometimes state programs that can provide funding to enrich your workforce. Do we have another question?
Oh, no. Before we move on, I just wanted to share the virtual audience shared with us that in her district, they're considered classified employees, not credentialed. Also members of CSEA union, not CTA.
Okay.
Perfect. So now Pedro and I, we live in Santa Clara County, and so we're obviously going to talk a little bit about Santa Clara County's workforce development. But a show of hands, how many of you are from outside of Santa Clara County? Oh, yay, yay, yay. Okay, then how many are you from Southern California? Okay, 2 or 3. Okay, good. And so this would be a good example of what we're doing in our county. Okay, so I was just catching a breath, virtual audience, because I've been like running back and forth and trying to maneuver this new concept that we're not used to. Okay, so in Santa Clara County, we sort of just listed like a lot of the things that have been going on in our county that relates to our workforce development. We have AB 212 training opportunities, and I just wanted to share that the popular trainings that have come up in the past year have been this trauma series. It's been so powerful that I've gotten phone calls that tell me that they would pay to attend this training because it's helped them work with families who are going through a lot, especially in the past year or so, that when we hear about these, we bring it back to the table. We bring it back to LPC, who helps us coordinate the AB 212, and we tell them, you know, this has been a powerful training. Let's do it again. And that's what we do. We give them trainings that they ask for and that they want. New this year, which started a little bit last year, was sort of developing this leadership in the county. And so we're doing reimbursements for leadership workshops, conferences, and even leadership coursework. So there's a reimbursement program designated for leadership, and anyone's eligible as long as they work for a Title V, but they can be, it is specifically for like the site supervisors who like Pedro, was sort of like in the role of a site supervisor, but still was kind of bouncing between like a teacher and a site supervisor. So a lot of these leadership opportunities that they can get reimbursed for would help them be a leader in their community, in their field. First 5 Santa Clara impact programs, such as Seeds and My Keystone, that's primarily working with family child care centers. We have found that, I think the last statistics I saw was 60% of the children 0 to 3 do not go to centers. They go to family child care centers. Is that true with the people who are not from Santa Clara County? Like, do you see that? Where are they going? Like family child. Correct. So they are in our family child care centers. And so what we found is that with the large number of kids between 0 and 3 that are going to family child care centers, and we know with family child care centers in California, they don't need much, right? They just need a house. They don't even need to own it. They could rent it. I actually just found out about that recently. So there's a lot of efforts being spent to identifying those family child care centers in the county, working with them, and having them go through like a cohort model type program. And so Seeds is a very literacy-based interactive. My Keystone is based on the class. And so that's a lot of interaction, and they're looking at videos, they're reflecting in their own group, and they're bringing it back to their own classroom, and looking at similar scenarios, simple things like morning arrivals and departures and snack time, that these family childcare owners, they didn't realize so much enriching conversations can take place in 5 minutes. And so there's a lot of work being done with that. Inclusion Collaborative does a lot of amazing stuff as well. Hence, we also we're at the Inclusion Collaborative Conference. We have Choices for Children, 4Cs. They offer a lot of trainings. Like 4Cs is very low. It's a low fee of $10, and so I think that makes it very attractive. We have a lot of community college partnerships. I know that Mission College sometimes offer ECE courses for free, and it's first come first serve. But we are when they offer it for free, we send it out to our teachers, and they have to commit to it like a college course, but they will get units tied to it. And then First 5 also has a wealth of trainings through the Community of Learning calendar. So those are just some like the big buckets. But I also wanted to share, we also have a lot of free online opportunities, not actually limited to just Santa Clara County. So all of you can use this, and I'm looking at the camera to look at the virtual room participants that you can even log on now. So California Early Childhood Online, CECO, they have over 41 hours of trainings, and they just added 10 trainings on family childcare. So now, we can send that information to a lot of the family child care centers. And sometimes the topics are as simple as how to run a business, right? Like they're opening up their home to take kids in, but there's all these operational pieces that they don't understand. How many of you've heard of CECO? Yeah, so for the rest of you, take a look at it, and you'll see a wealth of information. It's free. Desired Results is another site. Sometimes a lot of the in-person ones are fee-based, but I've noticed that they have a lot of webinars that are free. Unfortunately, the difference between this webinar is that you actually have to like sign up and attend at that hour, and they don't have it done the way Seco does it, where you're the independent login user. You do it at your own time. If you can't sleep at midnight, watch a video on LPC. But with the desired result, unfortunately, they have like these certain time limits that you have to jump on board. But I've actually attended one of them, very interactive. I see you nodding. Can you tell us about your experience?
So because they've made the switch recently too from DRDP Tech to DRDP Online, they've been offering quite a few, and they've been updating them regularly. I think part of why they haven't been sort of recording them so that you can go back and watch is because of the new system. There's new information almost every week, so some of what was probably done earlier in September might be a little bit outdated now because they've got new information to add. But they're great. You can ask questions. Their tech support or their staff will, if you need to continue on afterwards and ask questions because there's something that you're still not understanding, there's a lot of support. So it's been very helpful.
Yeah, it's very interactive. So if you work with a large group of people, but you can't attend it, maybe you can send one person to attend it, get some notes, and then maybe like cover it at a staff meeting. I know I've tried to send a lot of family child care providers, but oh my gosh, they work all day. And unfortunately, most of these seem to be in the hours between 8 and 6. But this is so important because we actually are recruiting a lot of family childcare to get rated in our county. They don't do DRDPs. Actually, they never heard of the tool. And we tell them it's okay. It's okay to come in and just get rated, just kind of start somewhere, and then we can see where we can slowly engage you into the process of understanding what the QRS is in our state, and then help them understand these pieces. So DRDP is one of them. Healthy and Active Preschool is another online. It's like 10 hours, and it's ran through Fresno, but we all know the importance of healthy and active preschoolers. And then Strengthening Families is another online. So these are all online opportunities for those who, if funding is limited and you don't have, a lot of money, these are still like some great resources to work with your teachers, your groups. And if it's not for hours, sometimes you could just take one and then have an in-person staff meeting and just pop up one of the videos and then have a discussion. So it's just however you want to make of it. So those are some online opportunities. We're constantly looking in our county, we're constantly looking for feedback from our teachers. And we always say, okay, they already work a long day, then they do professional development. So, at the end of the day, I want you to get something out of it. So we're always looking for meaningful training that works with them, with their schedule. And what I've seen is and this is just my observation with working with, I would say over thousands in the past 10 years that I've done this, thousands of teachers, and they could be the same year to year, but when they feel confident about the material, they love going to work. And so that's sort of the basis of when I wake up in the morning and I do my job, I want to make sure that teachers, they do the hardest job. And as we've seen throughout today's theme, like their wages are not as high, right? So I did see a teacher in the classroom, or I think somebody mentioned they were a teacher. Could you share with us, when you go to trainings, what you're looking for?
So because I've been doing inclusion, mostly all the trainings that I've been doing are learning about how to do co-teaching and how to work with my special education teachers and the other teachers in the class. We've been doing more trainings about how to work with children who have IEPs, how to modify the curriculum. We've been working on all that. Something new for me because I have a lot of background on ECE, just on early childhood education. So that's pretty much what we're doing right now, is just focusing on inclusion and trying to work together with my co-teacher, try to because she as well doesn't have any experience in ECE. She has her special education credential, but so we're working together to try to modify things for her and for me and for the children that are in the class. And this is our first year, so I guess we're trying it out, and it's been working really good. Yeah.
So then, well, I'm just going to move on to our stipend program in Santa Clara County. When we used to have a statewide program, it was called CARES. It was open to maybe over 4,000 early educators in Santa Clara County. And then it sort of had a second reiteration to CARES Plus. And unfortunately, due to a cut in budgets, we were able to sort of surface a stipend program, but there wasn't enough money to open it up to 4,000 early educators. So we, in our county, we focused on those who were enrolled at QRS rated sites. So if they worked at a rated sites, they were eligible. So we have roughly 850 that are eligible to participate in the stipend program. And each year about 500 participate. And about 40% of those are assistant teachers. So they're trying to get that degree. They're trying to get more knowledge. And sometimes the assistant teacher has 6 ECE units, comes in to get their first job or second job, and then they hear the buzz that there's a stipend program, and then they join, and they usually call me to say, I don't know what I'm doing here, but it's helping, and so the incentive helps them. So just in our county, it is just for rated sites. We offer, actually we have them submit an online enrollment form, and it includes completing a professional development plan. So it just asks a question about what their goals are, and so they can reflect upon it. And then they can choose one of 2 options. They either do the coursework or the training, and it's tied at $600 and $400. And we're sort of using the dollar amount that was created from the past stipend days, CARES days. And, I'm looking at the virtual audience because I've seen a couple of the counties. I had asked before I stepped up here if they also have a smaller run stipend program, and a couple of them do. How about in the room today, in your county, do you have an incentive stipend program? In what county? Oh, yeah. So you knew about CARES, yeah. But nothing now? Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay.
I work with preschool teachers, and I feel like they're in QRIS, but I don't know if that's the stipend, but I'm gonna find out, because I was thinking our special needs assistants, if they could, because they don't have ECE, and I feel like they should. So that's kind of.
You're working with your co-teacher. Do you have a stipend program?
We have a Quality Matters, but it's not a stipend program. That's my program director, by the way. But yeah, we don't have any other program.
Oh, okay, yeah. It's I think just like from my own sort of knowledge, I kind of poked around, and I've seen Sonoma carried it over from CARES. LA does it, Santa Clara, just a few counties, but they use their county dollars. So, and just to let you know, this is also co-funded by AB 212 dollars. And I would say maybe 65% of the participants are from the Title V programs. So it's a great partnership. This connects very well to what we covered 2 slides ago about having a registry account. So anyone that applies to our program must create or have a registry account. They don't quite understand it yet, but at least they have an account, and then we slowly work with them on understanding the different pieces of what we're trying to do. And so, so far up to date, the registry has, I just kind of peeked, and we have 55,000 from our state enrolled. But can anyone guess how many early educators probably we have like statewide that should be enrolled? Can anyone guess? I don't know, Michael, I'm gonna call you. Could you guess? I think like anybody that's like in this field. A lot, right? I don't think 55,000 sounds a lot, but not compared to this very large state. So yeah. And part of this program is we do require them to submit transcripts to the registry, and these are historical classwork. So we've seen stuff from recent to 10, 20 years ago, and so that way it gets verified by someone from the registry, and now their coursework is locked in. Okay. So for this fun slide, I decided to just pull out some quotes from our participants because it's just really good to see and hear what they've thought of it. So when we asked about the professional development plan, one person, a site supervisor at a Head Start program, when she was taking a leadership course, taking this early childhood education leadership course will support my supervision, coaching, mentoring style to better support the teachers in our program. So this was just her goal that she had put down before the beginning of the year. When they return, we actually ask them, how was it impactful? So this is a different quote, not associated, but this was an assistant teacher. And so last year she took some the class tool training, and so her answer was, in-person training helped me improve my use of class in the classroom. I was also able to use the system with much more naturally without straining to come up with the language or strategy to use with the children. And this was this actually spoke to me because it was an assistant teacher, and she realized the need of the class tool is in the rating process. And so it just helped her connect to being able to do some of these things without, as you can see, straining her. So that was a couple of examples. Do we have any questions about our county?
There was a question specifically about EC credentialing in Fresno and if it's connected to TK. And when that work was being talked about in 2014, 2015, it was a very new concept about the credentialing, and they were trying to use that as a platform in order to make it accessible to other UCs. You would have to the virtual world, you would have to look at what's still accessible within the UC system at Fresno and see if they're offering that credential, which I'm sure they are. I know at that time there was 2 students enrolled in that credential in 2015. It probably has expanded since our TK program has become available or more emphasized within our public school system.
So we have about 7 minutes, and we just are at the very end of our presentation.
So one of the biggest things that I advocate for, and I think you guys do in your agencies, is partnerships, knowledge, acquiring resources. And in order to empower us and be more resourceful, we have to share this content. So how are you going to get this knowledge? How are you going to get these surveys from the state in order to share your thoughts and ideas? And one way you're going to do that is you're going to connect with maybe early childhood professionals or organizations that get this content from the state directly. One of them might be your LPC group within your counties and being a part of those email groups so you can get that information firsthand. Maybe being a part of the First 5 mailer, right? Being aware of when these surveys come out so you can be well informed. And you can do that by looking online, seeing who those representatives are, and getting that content, right? Who's going to do that today? We have 5 hands. Yes, you guys don't see it online, but we see it. So, right? Next year, candy for all. Another piece. I want you to just take home some of these ideas, or when you leave here today, I want you to think about: are you ready for these changes? Right? Who knows? Are we? It's going to take some time. One thing that we say within our organization is that we are in constant mode of change. We're constantly evolving. We're constantly changing. Okay? If not, how can you become more involved in this process? So I'm going to ask you, what are you going to do to become more involved? How are you going to empower yourself?
Be a squeaky wheel, but you tell us where to be that.
What made you want to be teachers?
To make changes to better our students'
Okay.
lives.
And how did you do that? Oh, I wish it. It was shared to make changes to better our student lives. So how are you going to do that? I'm going to have a reflective conversation with one of our audience members right now.
No.
Okay, so what do you want me to say now?
So we're a teacher because we want to make changes in our students'
Yes.
lives.
And better their lives.
And how do you do that? How do you
By bettering
you,
ourselves and
Right.
bettering the process. Yeah.
Right. And when we better ourselves, we acquire knowledge,
Yeah.
and we want to make sure that it's quality, and partnering with different people to get to that point. And you're going to do that how? How are you going to develop these partnerships? Who are you developing partnerships with?
I think you're going to tell me.
Yeah, I am. But who in this group can tell us? Because we're from all over the state. The squeaky wheel which is the mic, is moving. You're going to do that by going back. When you go back in this presentation, you might look at our map, and you might see where you fall within this map and who you can partner with and who you can email out to sort of get more resources. These are groups that are connected with First Five. These are groups that are connected with our ECE state programs that are going to give you that content. If you're within Santa Clara County, join the LPC mailing group. Talk to First Five representatives. When you go to trainings, if they're hosted by WestEd or other nonprofits, see if they have mailers out, email groups, right? That's how you're going to be well informed. That's how you're going to influence change. Sitting in this room is the start of it because we're talking to each other, but it's not really where it needs to, where we should hold it, right? We need to take it outward, and we need to be loud, like our kids, right? We need to be expressive. And we all know what that looks like, right? Okay. I know. I'm that person. So I provided all of this content and resources or references that we talked about today. If you need to go back and you want to review the implementation plan in greater detail, you can do that. A lot of these things that we talked about, the future of ECE, this might be a 20-year plan. And as everyone in this room becomes heavily involved in the policies and procedures within this process, we're going to see this move a lot faster because we need people to do some of the footwork, right? Kimmy and I do it. Some of the people in this room are doing it. But the more we have, the more hands that work, the less work that we'll have to do, right? Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day.